Well, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming today. I'm Tim Warner, and this is Barry Lazos, who's going to talk to you today about, Budgeting 101, what I like to call quick and dirty. Some things to remember is I'm just here to present with you just some concepts and some terminology and some background information to give you some other language to use when you hear it around the center. A lot of times we hear a lot of vocabulary out of the PP&C world, and we're not exactly sure what it means. So I'm going to kind of present some of the budgeting language we use so that as schedulers or risk managers or C&DM folks can understand that and appreciate that there's a different vocabulary and maybe understand that you've heard it before and what it means. This is by no means an in-depth presentation. If you really want to learn about budgeting, there's a CFO course that takes a week that'll talk to you about budgeting. And so in the next 45 minutes to an hour, I'll talk a little bit about it, get you just introduced to it, and it's just, once again, to develop a dialogue. Third, there's a lot of people in this room who have a lot more experience with some of these things than I do, so if you have more experience and have some more thoughts, or I've said something incorrectly, please let me know, because there's some systems that I talk about here that I've only touched once in my 20-year career, and there's some that I'll never touch. So as you know, also we're filming today. I'm very happy about that, let me tell you. So for posterity and for an opportunity for other folks who can't be here during this time to maybe review it and go through this. So once again, just thanks for taking your time today, and hopefully you'll find it a little entertaining and at least a little educational as we move forward. So some of the things we'll talk about is right now we're in the throes of PPBE. What is that? What does it mean? How does it impact us? We'll talk about what budgeting means, some of the execution terms. We'll talk about some of the analysis, real top level analysis type of stuff, and then hopefully get you some takeaway vocabulary, some things that you should really know if you're going to work in the PP&C world or be a project manager, just some things you should probably be aware of. At NASA it starts, when we do our annual budgets, it's not really an annual thing, but it's called the PPBE, Planning, Programming, Budget, and Execution. Just what it says, planning, programming, budgeting, and execution. I actually have to look this up every single year to remember what it stands for. We always use the acronym. It's usually followed by a number, and we'll talk about that in a little bit after this. Right now we're doing PPBE 16, where we actually look at 15, fiscal year 15, and then we plan 16 through the next 5 years, which would be 21. So at any given time, we're typically working 3 different budgets. This is a new slide. The slide has morphed a little bit. I have borrowed slides and information from all over the place. So I'm working through some of these. This is a real time, every time I have a class, I get a little bit of feedback of how to present the data a little bit better. So hopefully this was a little bit better than the last time you may have seen it. So at any given time, we're working 3 budgets. We're working the formulation, advocacy, execution, and some would say we're actually working a 4th budget, which is closeout. So if time now is this yellow bar, we're executing fiscal year 14. We're actually trying to advocate and get funds for fiscal year 15, and we're actually starting the planning for fiscal year 16 all the way out through 21. So at any given time, that's what we're working on. And it's a continuous process, never really ends. It just goes in waves as to the severity associated with when we do each of these activities. So this is this is a perspective of what it looks like in any given period of time. It's an 18-month budget process. So we start out here, nominally April 1st is the start of the PBE kickoff. Sometimes it starts out, we actually started in March in some of these cases and in February in other cases. But generally speaking, during the April time frame all the way to probably September, October, we pull our budgets together. The agency gets together and says, what do we really want to work on for the next 5 or 6 years? What's our top level budgets? What do we want to do? What do we want to work on? Around this period of time, we pass that over to OMB. OMB asks us some questions. We have some dialogue back and forth. Then OMB shuts down and doesn't talk to us for a while. And then we get what's called the passback, which usually occurs right around the Thanksgiving time frame. And that's where OMB passes back to NASA what its budget's going to be for fiscal year 15 and out. And during that passback period, we get a chance to review what they say, we have some dialogue, and we get a chance to do what's called a reclama. A reclama is the chance for the agency to actually push back a little bit and say, no, we really don't think it's $1 billion. We think we need 1.2 in this program. So then, all of the federal agencies who are doing the reclama, they send it back to OMB. OMB does their racking and stacking and their presentations, and they go up to the president and make a recommendation to the president. The president then does what he needs to do, and he makes a recommendation back to OMB. And then finally, in February, at the State of the Union address usually, the president will unveil his fiscal year 15 budget. So in February, he did that this year, came out about mid-February. That's when we start getting to talk to Congress about what the executive agency wants to do for fiscal year 15 and out. You may have heard last year and this year there's some discussions about doing an asteroid retrieval mission. That's one of the big ticket items that the administration wants to do, the executive branch. Congress has some different ideas. So over the summer we have a lot of chats back and forth with Congress. Bolden just went to, I think he just went to Congress. Didn't he just go? Can't remember. He goes up to Congress, sits on the Hill, gets asked a lot of questions in front of the Senate and the budgetary committees, answers a lot of questions. If everything goes well, Congress will pass the budget, send it to the president, and he'll sign it into law before the start of October. And we'll get a fiscal year appropriations for the year, and we'll go out and be able to execute. Now, if Congress doesn't get their act together or the president doesn't like the budget, a couple of different things could happen. We saw that this year. We can get furloughed because there's no budget to work on, or we get what's called a CR, or a continuing resolution. And what that is a period of time that Congress sets aside and the president agree that we can start operating for a period of time, say 1 month, and during that 1 month period of time, we get 1/12 of our budget to operate. So say we pass the fiscal year 15 appropriations, then the agencies get their allocations from OMB, we go off and develop our operating plans and go execute what we promised and said we were going to execute. This is just another way to look at that same thing that we did, just broken down a little bit different detail. We have a couple of different acronyms here that you'll also hear during the PBE process and the PBE cycle. Once again, those are acronyms that everybody uses, and sometimes you got to go back and remember what they mean because a lot of people tend to forget. I'm one. So we start out, NASA does some studies, some plans. What are we going to do as an agency? What work needs to get accomplished? That goes into the strategic plan. Doesn't necessarily happen every year, but that's usually the basis for our budgets. We develop annual performance goals in discussions with OMB. What are we going to deliver on an annual basis? We start doing implementation planning. What should we really execute? Finally, the mission directorates will come out with what's called the strategic planning guidance. This is a very top-level document that essentially says, this is what we think we're going to do. Doesn't have a lot of details, but it just says this is the general basic concept of what we want to work on over the next year, 4 or 5 years. And then we get what's called, that gets decomposed into a program and resource guidance, a little more detailed, a little more information on it. And these are all set documents that you can go back and review over the years. You can see a continuation of changes. After we get the PRG, we get the PAA, which is once again just a little bit more details. Maybe it'll have center information, FTE, workforce information. The centers then will start getting involved and they'll start setting their service pool rates and what their service pool may look like and what their utilization of their wind tunnels sort of start looking like. Then what we get to is what's called the agency issues book. As we're developing this budget process, we notice there's going to be gaps and holes. For example, maybe a wind tunnel doesn't have any users. Maybe we decided we want to shut down the shuttle. So if we do that, that comes up and becomes part of the agency issue books, which goes up to the highest level of the of NASA leadership team, and they start making decisions about what to do. In some cases, we shut down the unitary wind tunnel. In other cases, they tell the agency that, hey, we need to work through this workforce issue associated with the shuttle shutting down. What are we going to do? How are we going to manage that? Once that gets issued, we go into what's called the Program Decision Memorandum. That tells us specifically what they're going to do with all those issues. They could say do nothing, which they've done before on some big issues, but a lot of times they just give us the direction of how to implement. Then we start the budgeting process, which is the Program and Institutional Guidance. That's the lowest level document, the last document that will be issued kind of as part of the PBE process. This becomes the baseline information for rolling out the next fiscal year. So this will come out probably around the August timeframe, September timeframe, and this will say this is your fiscal year 15 in this case. It'll get issued this year, so fiscal year 15, this is kind of the baseline of what you get for your FTEs, your procurement dollars. This is the last final change we'll probably get from an agency perspective. That then is the start for when we start doing the OMB submit, and this goes once again back through all of the things we talked about before as we start that process all over again. So budgeting, how do we do that? What do we do? What does that mean? So from the agency's perspective, we usually start out at the mission. I work for the Launch Abort System, which is a project within the program called Orion Multi-Purpose Crew Vehicle, which is in the Division of Exploration Systems Development, which is in Exploration and Operations Mission. I think we have 4 missions in the agency. There's Aeronautics, there's Human Exploration, there's Science Mission Directorate. There's now one called Infrastructure that came out a couple of years ago. So, and that's where all the funding are, that's the top level funding documents. It goes to NASA and then it goes to the mission. After the project, we start getting broken down into the elements. One of the concepts that you might hear is a lead center. This is big for aeronautics. Aeronautics will pick one center that the project manager will sit in. That will be the lead center for the activity associated with that project. And then you'll have the other elements of the project being done across the other centers. That's usually where the main contract is led out of, is that lead center. Not always the rule, but that's just generally what occurs when you have a lead center. In the case of Orion, the program actually has the lead contract with Lockheed Martin Space Systems to develop the Orion multi-purpose crew vehicle. So the other thing in budgeting we talk about is a WBS, or the work breakdown structure. All that is primarily how do we decompose some large object into something that are more manageable pieces so we can start talking about it and understanding it. In the case of a car, it's much easier if I start talking about the component pieces, the chassis, the hood, the wheels, than trying to talk about the car, because I don't know how to go from the car without breaking down in smaller pieces. It just makes it easier. House is a good example. You start talking about the walls and the framing and the roof systems and plumbing, electrical. It's just another way to take a look at the whole. How does that apply to what we do? And I apologize for these graphics because it came out of the 7120 document and they're pretty fuzzy in those documents as well. But NASA as an agency has decided that we're going to have standard WBSs for our certain projects. For spaceflight projects, we have these are the top level WBSs which you'll see. You'll see project management, system engineering. This is the way we set it up in FPD when we have projects. In our NX system, which is our archive system where we put our documentation. We have technology development projects. The one that I keep thinking of is ERA, Environmentally Responsible Aviation. They have, once again, 01, 02, 03 for advanced concepts, technology transfer 08. This was the standard that has been set up now for programs and projects. And then we have just the R&T portfolio has a standard top-level WBS elements. So what you'll see under project management would be scheduling. You'll see some projects will put travel all in that WBS. Sometimes you'll see C&DM. You'll see resources management. Those are the type of things you'll see underneath that as an example, broken down to further levels. This is an old WBS that we had for ERA. It didn't follow that other structure, but this just gives you one of the challenges we face at NASA is we have a technical WBS, which you'll see here, and you see what's called the financial WBS. Because we use a system called SAP, which we'll talk about in a little bit, we end up with these every center ends up having to have their own unique WBS, even though the work may be, this technical work may be the same at 2 different centers. So in this case, for example, I had NRAs at the 4 different Aero centers, Langley, Ames, Dryden, and Glenn. They're all under ERA 1.01, 0.02, but I had to have a separate fiscal WBS for each of those. So we get in a little, so when you talk WBSs, sometimes you need to talk about a little bit about whether it's a technical WBS you're talking about or a fiscal WBS. If you guys have any comments or questions, you can yell at me, or if I'm saying something wrong. This is the biggest class I've taught. Yes?
Could you repeat that? Which one is the technical?
So this would be a technical WBS, all right? And they tend to be, I can usually make those shorter than the financial WBS, and this is just one example, okay? Each project will have their own, and this was from ERA. And the problem I have is just to identify or let you know that a financial WBS may be a little more complicated because I have to have a unique WBS at each center, even though the work may be the same or similar at 2 different centers. Does that make sense? Okay. So the other thing I want to introduce to you is what's called an OBS, or an organizational breakdown structure. All that essentially is an org chart. And so in our case, why do I care about an OBS? Because I've got to find out who's going to actually be doing the work for me. So in this case, I think I'm going to have somebody, I know I need somebody from the engineering directorate, so I'll zero in on that. I know I need some systems testing or some testing being done, so I'll do it at the system engineering and testing branch. And here's a list of the folks that were assigned to this branch when I pulled this chart out. And so I might need to identify a key person in this branch and negotiate with the branch head as to who's going to do that work. And that person will become my control account manager. A control account is where the WBS, which is the scope of work, impacts who's going to actually be doing the work and who's responsible for it. So in our case, I got the gentleman from D210 who's actually going to give budget and responsibility to deliver work for me. And so that's a control account manager. Now sometimes this can be as low as a single person doing one bit of work, one test for you. Or it can actually be, in our case, which is the launch abort system, which is actually Kevin Rivers, who's the project manager for Orion MPCV launch abort system. He's actually the control account manager. And he manages a lot broader. In the Orion case, he's the control account manager, but he actually has gone further, and he actually has a control account managers for lower level things as well. So you can break that control account manager down even further if you want as a program or a project. So as I'm trying to develop the budget, where do I go for information how much it's going to cost to get the work done? So I can go look at old data that I might have from old contracts or current contracts. I can start looking at grassroots estimates, which is a bottom-up approach to trying to cost something. I'll utilize 533 reports, which are contractual deliverables from contractors who give me an idea of what it costs to do work. I'll work with the guys who actually own the requirements, who are actually going to do the work. Why am I giving them the work? Because they have lots of experience, so they may know exactly what it costs to do the work any amount of time. I'll take a look at workforce that have done previous jobs. I'll pull up old projects that I may have had and start taking a look at them. And this is how I start developing the budget for that control account. So now that I've developed a budget, what do I kind of need to do with that information? So one of the tools that we use are the financial systems that are out here. I can explain part of this chart because I touch some of these systems, other systems I don't. There's a lot better experts out here on all of this. Yolanda's one of them. But the main thing is our core financial system, which is SAP. This is a transactional database. Everything gets done in SAP. So SAP, when it has data, it spits it out into something called BW or JBob, I think is the new system name. Bob J, got it backwards, sorry. I haven't even gone to training yet, so close, thank you. So this is where you'll pull data reports about what your workforce has been expending or where your costs are or who's doing what financial work has been accomplished. This is financial information. You have a WBS structure. We talked about the financial WBS. That has to all be populated in something called MDM, which is Metadata Manager. Very good. Thank you very much. That was a test. All the WBSs, all the financial WBSs have to be populated in this system. And this has a lot of rules and a lot of people you have to go through to get into this system and make this happen. I've never touched this in my life, and I'm so thankful I haven't. There's the N2, which is the NASA financial system, or the NASA budgeting system. This is not a transactional, this is just a budget system. This is where budgets go into and just stay resident, and you pull data out of.
So that's where we'll get the PRG, the PAA, the PAIG.
Thank you. So those documents get uploaded to this. Did you hear? That's where the PAG, the PRG, the PAIG, all of those documents that I talked about before get loaded into that system. For government workers, this is an important system here. This is WebTAS. This is where you put your time and attendance. This interacts with the ALDS, the labor distribution system, which all this communicates back and forth. All this is just show you there's a myriad of financial systems out here that all interact to get you the actuals that you've been looking for, what has actually been occurring. This is a list of terms that you may or may not heard. I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't ever use all of them in my general day-to-day business. The ones that are most exciting are the program authority. That tells you the program how much funds it has to actually spend in your given year. We have new guideline or new obligation authority. Think of this as this is what we promised to give you, and this is what we've actually given you, the actual cash that you can spend, your funds. We have a commitment, which is how you reserve funds to say that, hey, this is what I want to buy, this is what I think I want to buy. We have obligations, which is how we actually order the funds. We have cost, and we have disbursements. A better way to look at that is this is one of the buying the dinner example, which I always like. It's a very good one. So in my case, I asked my wife, hey, can I have 20 bucks? I think I might want to go out and do a little bit of entertainment this week. She goes, sure. She's given me authority to have a budget of $20. So my buddy calls me up and says, hey, let's go to dinner. We're going to go to a cheap place. I said, yeah, I'll go ahead. Instead of going to the movies, I'll go to the dinner. I've made a commitment to go to dinner. In this case, a lot of the times we'll see it as a PR. When you write a purchase request, you've made the commitment when you hit the save button on the PR. So in our case, we sit down, the server comes over, we actually order the dinner, we've made the obligation. In our case, the purchase request gets over to the contracting officer, they go out, solicit bids, they choose one bid, and they actually place the order with the vendor. That's the obligation when they actually sign, the contracting officer signs their name on that piece of paper or pushes the button in the system. When I eat my dinner, I've incurred a cost because that's called incurring the cost. In our case, the goods have been delivered to the center or the services have been provided. That is when I've incurred the cost. That's when the government really has to pay the bill. When do I pay the bill? I actually pay the bill when I get the invoice. I have been in situations where I've had a vendor complain to Dan Golden that he wasn't getting paid in the project I was in. Well, come to find out, he never submitted an invoice. So always something to remember there. They have to submit the invoice. So now that we've gone through those things, let's talk about phasing plans, because phasing plans are the way that I figure out where am I going and how do I get to where I want to go. A phasing plan tells me on a month-by-month basis how I'm going to expend the funds. Usually it goes all the way back to a commitment. It shows when I'm going to obligate and when I'm going to cost those funds. Most of the time, NASA, depending on your program or project, they use cost as the metric. When is the goods and services actually going to be delivered? One of the things that I need to think of as I'm developing this is when do I need the product or when do I need the goods and service? So I have to start talking to my scheduling person. What is the project? When does the project need those things? If the item needs to be here by December, how long does it take to get a PR into the system? How long does it take to get the statement of work written or the requirements written? When do I need to get all the people together to write those requirements and figure out what those requirements are for that widget that I'm going to buy? I need to bring my C&DM person in. So once I establish what my requirements are, and write the purchase request and the good gets delivered, I need to make sure that it does what it's supposed to say. So the C&DM person's got to be part of that so they can kind of track what the requirements were up front so I can do the verification and validation on the other side. And then cost, I've got a budget for that. What is my plan for the expenditure so I know I have the $100 that's going to take to buy that widget. So PP&C starts coming together. This is one place where PP&C comes together is when we start doing our phasing plans. So this is where we're going to have fun, right? Analysis. So that was my plan, right? I have a plan. I know where all of my actuals come from because we talked about the SAP system. And now I have to do the analysis. There's a lot of different types of analysis you can do here. And some of them are listed here. 533 analysis is, that's a financial document that'll say, here's what the costs that were expended during this period of time. This is the plan for the next 2 months. Does it make sense? Is it what's according to my phasing plan? I can look at trends. If I've been burning $10 a month for the last 6 months, does it make sense that I'm going to continue burning $10 a month for the next 6 months? You'll see that a lot with FTEs. Does it make sense that if I have a person working full-time for the first 6 months, is he still going to burn at the same rate? So I have to look at trends. All of these things, once again, still tie schedule, costs, and technical together. Because if I have a trend of somebody working full-time for 1 month, I need to make sure I'm still getting that technical deliverables I want. And if I haven't gotten the technical deliverables and he was supposed to be finished this month, then is he still going to keep working to give me that technical product that I need? Am I going to meet that milestone? So this is a typical report that comes out of the project management tool. This is a Langley tool, excuse me. It is an Ames tool. A couple of different centers use it. Langley's one of them. This is one that I pulled out for the launch abort system. A couple of different things you'll need to look at is budget and guideline. The budget, this is what I was hoping to get for the fiscal year. This was my planned, this is what my project said they were going to give me, my program said they were going to give me. So in my case, I was supposed to get $3.3 million for the year. This was my commits and obligation plan, these red, these lines. This is how I planned on obligating my funds. This is how I planned on costing my funds, or the goods and services were to be delivered. And these are my actuals. And so the first thing I notice when I look at here is my actuals aren't matching what my plan was. So I have to start looking at what's the variance of that? Why is there a variance? So in this case, I have a labor, this is wrapped up in this, I have $38K worth of a labor variance. So there's another report that'll tell me that I didn't expend as much labor dollars as I originally planned. So what does that mean? I have to start doing the analysis which says why. Why is that happening? Is it because there's a rate difference? I planned a guy at $150 an hour and actually the person doing the work was $125 an hour. I had planned one person full time and come to find out they got the work done in 75% of the time. But that's only part of the question. The next question is, did I get what I technically wanted during that period of performance? So I have to ask that third level, that third question. What did I get or what didn't I get because I have this variance? In procurements, in this case, I was $250K below. Here at Langley, if I have a support service contractor like AMA, I have to get the PR in to the system at a certain date. So the contracting officer will do just a bulk award of all of those purchase requests. If I don't get that in by a certain time, I'll miss that window. Therefore, my obligations will be less than what my plan was. So the question I have to ask my resource analysts are, why didn't we get that PR in place? Did we not have the funds here? In our case, we were expecting we could have been expecting the funds to show up sooner, and they didn't show up. We only got 85% of the budget that we had anticipated. So in one case, this could be, I was planning on buying $1 million instrument, but I didn't have the funds here on the center to put the PR in to get that, to write the PR for that $1 million instrument. So I've got to start asking the questions. Well, if I didn't get those funds, what impact does it have to the rest of the project? Is the technical work going to be done? That's real analysis, because a lot of times we want to just stop at, oh, the delta was 38K, the delta was 215K, and the difference was 37K. Okay, so what does that mean? You always have to ask the question the next level down is, what does it mean? Why is it important that I missed it? Even if you overexpend the funds, what does that mean? What's the impact of that? So that ties to schedule. So here's a sample schedule. So in this sample schedule, I was expecting this work to be done on April 20th. Well, now it's looked like projecting it's actually going to take out to May 10th. So given that, where's the resources to pay for that extra work? Is it going to take, it's taking extra time. Time equals money. What's the impact of that? Why is this work not getting done? I need to talk to my scheduler. I need to talk to my technical people. It's not, PP&C is not just looking at one data point. You have to ask the whole spectrum of questions of what is the impact of these things. Because I'm still projected to kind of end up on final deliverable is supposed to be about the same time. Well, if that's the case, what did I do wrong up here that it took so much longer to do it? What did I miss? So you always got to ask those questions as you're doing the analyses. So this is the fun part. This is the other definitions that we always talk about. Program year does not equal fiscal year, which does not equal calendar year. Program year is actually the year that the Congress gives us the funds. And program years may last 1 or 2 years, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Fiscal year is a period of time that usually, in the government's case, it's October 1st through September 30th. Calendar year, obviously, you know, January to December. When I talk to my Lockheed Martin counterparts, I actually need to talk to them about, when they say fiscal year, is that Lockheed Martin's fiscal year or is that government fiscal year? Because their fiscal year is actually a calendar year. So I need to talk to them and make sure we're all talking the same language when we talk about these things. One of the things also that has been drilled into me is we don't have money or cash in the government, we have funds. So people tend to use money and cash as a vernacular, but it's actually funds. You can tell a lot from the financial, from the resource perspective what it means when somebody tells you about funds by looking at looking at the funding code or the fund code. So in this case, the first 3 digits or first 3 letters, alphanumeric code, tells you what the mission directorate is that has the funds. So in the first case, this is Aero, this is expiration. The next 2 deal with how many years you have for the funds to be obligated. So in this case, X2 signifies I have 2 years from October 1st of, in this case, 2013 to expend the funds, to obligate the funds. So it's from October 1st of 2012 to September 30th of 2014 to get those funds obligated. If I don't get them obligated in that 2-year window, they expire and they go back to the Treasury. October 1st. So it's 2 years, October 1st of the first fiscal year, October 1st of the next fiscal year. So that number that's after the X could be, there's a couple of different ones. There's a 1, there's a 2, there's a 5, there's a 0. It used to be 0. I don't think they have 0 anymore. They've gone to 7. C of F funds, cost of facility funds used to be no-year funds. Now they've gone back to 7-year funds, I think. Apollo funds are 0-year funds. I was at a conference a couple of years ago and they were talking about still having Apollo funds on the books being able to obligate that they haven't closed out on yet. And they're 0-year funds. Congress doesn't like 0-year funds because they lose control over all of this stuff. Then the last letter talks about D, usually is either D or R. I've not seen anything else there. D is direct. That means the funds were obligated or authorized by Congress directly to NASA, so they are NASA funds. R stands for reimbursable, so that could have come from another government agency like NOAA or United States Air Force or another DoD agency. Or it could have come from industry. Gulfstream will do a lot of work with the aeronautics folks. We're getting ready to probably get some Lockheed Martin funds to come in. So when those reimbursable funds come in, it'll have an R on the end of it. The other thing we'll talk about here is obligation metrics. This is a big thing that's driven over in the aeronautics. In the Orion program, it's actually costing metrics. This just says that at the end of the fiscal year that I get the funds, or the PY funds, I have to be at a certain metric. Aero, it tends to be 99% committed, 98% obligated, 75% costed. In Orion, they want me to be 100% costed. If I'm not, then I have to justify why I'm not. Because they gave me funds for the year, I told them this is what I needed to get done, the work I needed to get done. So if I didn't get the work done this year, then you obviously don't need it. We're going to take you the budget away from last year for next year. The other word we'll talk about is forward funding, which just means usually funds that are usually obligated at the end of the fiscal year and carry over into the next fiscal year. So some of the takeaways. PBE, what was that? Program Planning and Budget and Execution is a 30-month process, usually 18 months for the planning and advocacy, 12 months for execution. NASA's budget is only 0.5% of the annual budget. Program year versus fiscal year, this is one that people tend to forget about, but it's important in the fiscal world, so or the budgeting world, you understand the difference of those two things. And when you do your variance analysis, you always have to ask the why. What does it mean? What's the so what? Why is this important to me? What have I not done, or what have I gotten too much? Because being behind schedule could be just as bad as being behind. Being ahead of schedule can be just as bad as being behind schedule. So those are the things that you need to always ask yourself. And always, where do the things I do in budgeting touch C&DM and scheduling? Because all of these things are all linked together in the PP&C world. There's also risk that I haven't talked about, which is also part of this. What happens if I'm planning on a budget of $100,000 for this piece of machinery, and there's a risk that it could be higher than that? If it is higher, where do I get the extra funds to pay for that? You know, all of those things are all tied together. Whew, that's it. Nobody had any questions? That was good, or one question, thank you. Yeah, I owe you how much now?
We'll talk about it later.
Okay, good.
And then if your funds are there.
So if you guys have no questions, I appreciate you being here. Please feel free to provide any kind of feedback that you might have on this, or any changes you'd like to see, or if I didn't cover anything. Thank you all for your time.